day one of Dreamforce. Many of you, like me, who've chosen to come back for the conference, this is perhaps my 10th year. But the same excitement, right? It's time of the year, that time of the year when we are here for the conference, the same excitement, a chance to get away from our day-to-day grind, chance to absorb something new. Let's talk about this session. Why are we here? This is an opportunity to have a conversation with Charles Filizzola. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Sompo Horizon. I'm sure you've heard this topic many times before, right? Companies trying to reinvent a new business model, trying to scale up. But what Chuck and his team are doing at Sompo is they've taken on this large and complex, multifaceted challenge, societal challenge of caregiving. And they're ready to get launched in the US market. That's what we hear from them today. Before we deep dive, let's do a quick round of introductions. I'll start with myself. I'm the last one on this page. My name is Ruchin Agarwal. I am a principal with PricewaterhouseCoopers in the Salesforce practice. My background and experience is largely around front office, digital, been in the Salesforce ecosystem for a really long time. But I've been working with Chuck and Tom for almost a year on this initiative. So Chuck, I'll go for you for intros, and then Tom, go to you.
Thanks, Richard. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Charles Filizzola. I go by Chuck for those who know me personally or want to get to know me personally. I spent about 30 years in the tech business, and in multiple roles, in CIO type roles, CTO, COO roles. Mainly for like software companies and insurtech and health tech companies. And I recently rejoined Sompo because I was very excited about this initiative that we're doing on bringing a new service to caregivers. So we're going to talk more about that today. Tom?
Thanks. Tom Cavanaugh, principal at PwC. I started my career, for those of you who remember that first .com bubble back in the late 90s. Went 0 for 3 as an entrepreneur, and then took on more life responsibilities and got into something a little more stable. So I've spent the last 20 years or so as a consultant around this notion of business model reinvention. So how can companies drive profitable growth through new products, new service offerings, developing new channels, reaching new customer segments. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. What PwC thinks Sompo is doing, as Ruchin mentioned, is really, really exciting.
Perfect. Let's get into it. Chuck, let's start with you. We know caregiving is a unique challenge, right? Its impact on the individual as well as on the employers, right? Loss of productivity and all that. You want to share a little more about your perspective on
Sure.
the caregiving challenge?
Well, first of all, a lot of people sometimes say, well, what is a caregiver, right? What does that really mean? And what are we talking about here specifically about caregiving? So, it's interesting. When I first joined Sompo and started working with the folks at PwC, I wasn't 100% sure what caregiving meant. And all of us are somewhat involved or will eventually be involved in some kind of caregiving situation. I think when you look at caregiving is really about taking care of somebody, whether it's a family member or a close friend, that is going through a need to have your support. And that's really what a caregiver is. And most of us are working while doing caregiving. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about today, and about this. You're going to hear a lot of stats about that and what we're specifically working on collectively here. I think Rosalind Carter was the one that said there's like 4 types of people in the world, and I'm going to have to read off her quote exactly. I don't want to misquote her. There are those that have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregiving. So those are all very important things. So every one of us in this room will be in one of those modes at one point of our lives. It's actually a good thing if you are, because that means you've had a good, very fulfilling life, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish here, continue to do that. And a survey also conducted by Rosalind Carter was that 68% of the people that are involved in caregiving, when they're working, they didn't consider doing more projects. They really didn't take on more work at work because they were so stressed about caregiving. So, I mean, that's one thing that I really want to call to your folks' attention. And about 60% of them felt that they had a lot of quality challenges while working and being a caregiver. So you may or may not know someone, or you may personally be in this situation yourself, but think about this. If you're working and you're caring for someone at the same time, there's a lot of stress and anxiety, and that's what you'll see here on the screen. About 41% of the folks are feeling a lot of stress and anxiety. I think one thing that I found was really quite compelling is the stat on the lack of guidance. A lot of folks don't really know what to do when they're in this role. Sometimes it's just thrusted upon them. They wake up one morning and they get a call from somebody, and all of a sudden they're in a situation of becoming a caregiver. So, what we're trying to do here, what we've been working on, is to try to alleviate that stress, alleviate the stress of the caregiver, especially folks that are in the workplace.
Yeah, so to add on to Chuck's point, if we think, what's the most precious commodity in life? Time, right? And in all those stats that were just on the previous slide, lack of time is a key contributor to all of those. So one of the kind of driving notions when we embarked on this journey about 18 months ago was, how do we give time back, right? Because to Chuck's point, and I can't remember all the stats he rattled off.
I don't either.
He has an iPad, I don't. But it does, and as we went, you can see on the slide here, right? It in places, workplace productivity, and we did a lot of primary research early on, not only just to codify the market opportunity, but really kind of define who we wanted to be, right? Early on in this journey, and really kind of put a beacon out there for who we want to be when we grow up. I talked a little bit about my background. One of the great things I've enjoyed about my career at PwC is I've been able to be an entrepreneur within a well-established, well-capitalized construct, and that's very similar to something that we're doing here with Sompo that I think is really, really exciting. But the other point I wanted to make here is, this is a large issue, challenge that isn't going away. So if we kind of think about in 2020, about 18% of the US population, about 60 million people were over the age of 65. That number is forecasted to grow to 80 million by 2040 and 95 million by 2050. Inversely, the caregiver to care receiver ratio in 2020 was 7-to-1. By 2040, that's forecasted to shrink to 4-to-1.
Big problem. Yeah, I think it's something that I want to go back one slide real quick.
Sure.
I just want to call out the one item on here. So the 92% of caregivers report that caregiving impacts their stress levels, with 48% rating their stress as high. So just think about for a second, you think about your workplace, people that are around you, yourself. If you're working and dealing with caregiving, this has become a big, big challenge. That's a big number.
Yep. Let's talk about, we know this is a growing challenge, right? Chuck, I'll go to you. Why do you think, why Sompo, right? Like, why now? What's the experience overall that Sompo has in other parts of the globe? And I guess the question is, why in US, right? I know both of you gave a lot of stats.
Yep. Yeah, so let's talk about a few things. So those of you who don't know Sompo is a Japanese company, and our slogan for our business is we've been caring for people since 1888. Sompo has been around for a very, very long time. You'll see a quote up here on the screen from our CEO in Japan. I'll just let you kind of read through this, and also from Tim Ryan, a senior partner here at PwC. These are kind of key things that are paramount to kind of the purpose of what we're doing as both organizations. So if you go back to Sompo's roots, over 100 plus years, mainly we're known for being a property and casualty insurance company, and one of the big three within Japan. They came over to the U.S. Back around 60 years ago and started also doing P&C business here in the U.S. So, Sompo, if you get a chance to go onto Sompo's website, Sompo Holdings website, you'll see this whole kind of theme park of these things that Sompo is doing. And those of you who are familiar with Japanese business models, that know that they're It's a slightly different, way of going about business than we do here in the States. They, yes, of course, they care about the results of their business, like most businesses do, and that's very, very important. But they also care about the process of getting there and the purpose that it's serving. So that's something that Sompo as an organization has really expanded outside of the property and casualty world in Japan. They started getting involved in looking at the aging population, as Tom mentioned too. Very similar stats happened in Japan, except the wave is a little bit earlier than it was here in the States. So they spent time thinking about, well, what can we do as an organization internationally to make a difference, to do something purposeful? So they've kind of leveraged and moved out of the pure property and casualty business and got into the business of like the nursing care and started really trying to understand more about how to have healthy aging, how to have people have dignity with aging. And this is a little bit more of the history of the Japanese care business. When we started looking at doing this here in the U.S., you really brought up a good stat there. So what we also realize is the number of people in the U.S. above the age of 85 has risen more than 20 million. That's since this is over the past 20 years, so it's a 57% increase. That's a lot compared to the only 17% increase of population. Why is that important? Because Japan already went through all this same thing. They went through this, and we started looking at Sompo, how do we take what we've learned in Japan and look at that here in the U.S. And those, it's also important to understand that there's, the markets are going to be slightly different too. When you look at the different pieces of the Japanese market versus the U.S. market, the Japanese market, like long-term care and the folks there are covered very well by the government to take care of their elderly. And I think, most Americans, we look at Japan and we're like, wow, they have very purposeful, long, long caring lives. They have a lot of respect for elders. We see a challenge here in the U.S. where, the government, yes, there's Medicare and there's other programs, but they're certainly not really in place to help all of us as well as we do in some of these other countries. So think about what happened during COVID. Okay, during COVID, what do we see? It was very sad. We saw a lot of deaths that occurred in nursing care facilities. It's devastating. I personally lost some relatives during COVID into this situation. And when Sompo first reached out to me and told me about this initiative, I made a big decision to do this because of the purpose of this initiative and what we're doing. So think about the future, today and the future. More and more people are wanting to bring their families, their parents, their aunts and uncles. They want to care for them in person. They want to bring them home. They want to care for them at their home. So how do we do that as a society? It's not easy. So these are some of the questions that were in front of us, and we leveraged a lot of what we were doing in Japan and started bringing that here. We decided to partner with PwC, by the way, and thank you, by the way. And also, we're also working with a couple of other vendors in different parts of our build out, what we're doing. But the reason why we worked with PwC is that, one, we were looking for someone that was also, cared about a purposeful built business, and that was scalable. We wanted a company that could also help us define the strategy of what we were trying to do, help us build the operating model to support it, and then the reason why we're all here is let's get the technology around this platform, because we want a digital smart platform that's built to support this and can scale. So that's the reason why we are here. That's the reason why we started this business.
Tom, what do you think in terms of why PwC would be a good partner for Sompo? Your perspective?
Yeah, I think there are a handful of things to build on Chuck's point. The opportunity to partner with Sompo was appealing for several reasons. First, thinking about profitable growth, right? Helping our clients diversify both geographically as well as their product portfolio. So really what we're looking to do here, as Chuck was articulating in the history of Sompo being primarily a P&C insurer, and in Japan, we're standing up a services business in the U.S. So anybody who's worked in the insurance industry, that's a little bit of a dichotomy, to say the least. I think the other component, and as you look up the quote from Tim Ryan, our U.S. senior partner, we're in business to solve society's most challenging problems, and as we've been explaining, this is clearly one of them. So the opportunity to make a difference there doesn't always come along that often, and it's absolutely something that we wanted to be a part of. We wanted the opportunity to collaborate with Sompo and reimagine not only what a business could look like, but really making a societal impact. And I think the last one, and anybody who's spent a little bit of time in this space, right, as any of kind of the four personas that Chuck described earlier, has kind of lived this in one way, shape, or form, and it's a very emotional, topic. And Tim Ryan, who's been involved in this effort with us, is passionate about it for that reason. He's been through it. He was a caregiver for his father, so it's very near and dear to his heart.
Perfect. I know, Chuck, you said a lot of the learnings from the Japanese market leverage that, but then if you don't mind sharing, launching this in the US market, is something different, right? Like, what are the unique perspectives of launching this in US along with the technology platform that you're standing up for caregiver? If you don't mind sharing this with the...
Sure. So, I mean, what's interesting is, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. market is very, very different than the Japanese market. And what I mean by that is that, we had to think through a business model that was sustainable, because we are, most of the best care comes through private means and or through other healthcare insurance, and there are things that a lot of people don't necessarily know what they are entitled to actually have access to. So we saw a big fragmentation, and I think it's important to understand why is that important. Why is that necessary to know? When you look at a caregiver, a working caregiver, yes, they may personally be covered by their own healthcare insurance, or their parents may be covered by, it could be Medicare or Medicaid or whatever programs they have specifically in place, and and they also may be a veteran or have some other insurance. They may or may not have long-term care insurance. So, not knowing what to do is a big challenge. So when we decided to kind of launch this, we took a look at what was out there in the marketplace today, and there are a lot of great tools out there and a lot of great partners, and there's a lot of great things in the ecosystem. But how do you bring it all together? How do you make it very easy? How do you make it simple for someone who's waking up every day, going to work? In some cases, they're in what we call the sandwich generation, which means they're dealing with an aging parent and also some young children in the home. And they could be a single parent. So, and they're working full time. So this is, time is important. Time management's important. Ease of use is important. And we had to think through this on how to make this work in the U.S. market. So, our decision was to kind of launch this first as an employee benefit. That's what we're doing. We worked very closely with PwC on the whole launch plan. And I don't know, Tom, if you want to kind of walk through that.
Sure. So as Chuck mentioned, Sompo being a Japanese firm was not as familiar both with the U.S. market as well as the healthcare system. So we were really able to help kind of accelerate early on the definition of not only the market opportunity, right? So obviously you can do a bottom-up analysis using census data, what's the total addressable market, but where we were really able to help was to codify more of the attitudinal and psychographic component of it. Really what is the underlying problem that we're trying to solve, and how would we go about doing that. And as we went through, we did a lot of primary research and talking to caregivers. And all of that really kind of came across, right? The emotion, the empathy. And one thing to point out, Chuck talked about the ecosystem that exists. It's largely targeted at the care recipient, not the caregiver. The caregiver oftentimes is lost in the equation. And if you think back to some of the stats that were on the previous slide, all of the impacts that go into that person providing care, the sacrifices they make, not only emotionally, but physically, right? The toll that it takes going through that journey is vast. And so we did some really interesting work early on to help inform ultimately the design of what we are looking to build, right? And we have built a digital front end, right? But it has to take into account all of those attitudinal components that we uncovered. And so we did a lot of really interesting work with users around design, flow, how we capture information, how we play it back, how we juxtapose launching a new brand. So as you go through, if you remember, right, the Sompo's logo is red. Well, red's really not an empathetic color. So we had to pivot from that, and so we did a lot of branding research. We did naming, so the name for this is CareGo. And so we kind of went through kind of some early design iterations. We then created an alpha platform where we get kind of continuous user feedback from an ongoing standpoint that fed into our sprint design and development plans. We were just getting ready to launch our beta, so we're going to put a whole bunch of users on it and get much more robust feedback prior to the actual platform launch at the end of the year. And so as I mentioned earlier, it's a digital front end, but there's value in other aspects of the product as well. As Chuck said, we've created an ecosystem. And so there's advice and coaching. So we had learned early on there were a couple of key things that really came out of the research. The first was unpreparedness, like Chuck mentioned, right? This comes on like a thunderbolt, right? You don't plan for your mother to have dementia. It just happens, right? So the next then became unreliable information, right? So you obviously get the diagnosis from the physician, and then what does everybody do? Go onto the internet, Google something, go on to WebMD, and it's doom and gloom, right? So unreliable information, unpreparedness, and advice. So we have a digital front end that begins to get at that, but the other is we have a team of coaches, right, that you can actually speak with, right? As a part of the offering, you get coaching sessions, right? You can add on to them as need be, but you're getting expert opinion from an individual. You're not just consuming information. You have the ability to do that, but there's people that stand behind it. Because as we learned, right, what people really value is community and understanding. They want to know that they're not alone. They really valued people that have been through this before, expert advice to be able to help them on that journey.
Yeah, and to add to what Tom said, when we look at, well, what is this? We're here at Dreamforce, and what has caregiving got to do with Salesforce? So, we made a decision to choose Salesforce as our core platform. And, why did we do that? I think it's important to understand that, we needed a lot of great technology and tools to do that. For example, we had to build this fast. So we were concerned about making sure that we could build, have a good speed to market on this. We wanted something that's scalable because we do expect this platform to be somewhat viral. It's going to be used by a lot of folks across the world eventually. So we didn't want to build this on something that was not scalable. And that's something that we kind of went through in this whole process. The ease of integration was an important piece, and also the UI experience. The platform is just a piece of the puzzle. It's the glue, though. It's a major glue to this puzzle that we talked about. Tom mentioned the ecosystem. We have a lot of partners out there. We talked about the fragmented market. So picture yourself, you're working, and you're dealing with this situation that just got thrusted upon you, and you want something that it makes that whole process easier for you. Like me. I mean, I have 2 parents now that I'm dealing with in a caregiving situation. How do I know I'm doing the right thing? They live up in New York. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. My brother also needs assistance, so he can't help. So that's not a bad thing. It's just I feel bad for him also. So there's just me, and I work full time. So I turn to my team members. I'm like, these are the kind of things that are important to me. If you could help me with this, help me with that, because I don't want to just Google search something, because I get so many different answers, and sometimes I can't make heads or tails of which one is correct. So we have worked with other partners too to build up a knowledge base to kind of make sure we understand what's most important, specifically by jurisdiction. I think it's important to understand that, like a lot of other businesses, certain things are available in certain states, and other states they are not. Or certain things might be free, or you might have somebody coming to your home, and my mom might be coming to visit me, which would be great, but I need a ramp and I need some grab bars in my home, and other materials which I wouldn't even know where to start. And do I just Google and overbuy stuff? And what if it's not the right stuff? What if the stuff breaks? So we want to ensure the reason why I'm sharing this all with you is we did this all on Salesforce as the digital platform, which was able to kind of get us that quick speed to market to build this, but it connected us with all these other fragmented services that we spent a lot of time vetting to make sure that they were accurate, that they were the right partner for us to be part of this ecosystem. And that's what we're building. We're building a new ecosystem on the Salesforce platform, and that is going to that will continue to be grown, and we're pretty excited about it right now.
Perfect. Yeah, I think you see here, this is that Salesforce, as Chuck was describing, he selected Salesforce as that digital platform. You see a lot of, I'll talk through a little bit more details about what we are enabling as a digital platform. You see a lot of components of the solution here. Seems very busy, right? But that was specifically the reason we selected Salesforce, which is, it's not like we're having to stitch together different components and data sparking back and forth. Yes, there is data integration. You see reference to APIs and all of that, because as Chuck was saying, right, it's an ecosystem that Sompo is enabling, which is bringing together, ecosystem of vendors with content, with product and services, everything around caregiver. So that's what we are doing. We are enabling this in the platform. At the heart of this was really the health cloud, right? Which is, the focus, as Tom and Chuck was saying, focus on the caregiver, right? As we onboard the caregiver, how do you make sure we understand the unique situation, connect them with the care advisor, right? So that they're put on a unique journey. And we've put together a messaging platform so that as they are working with the care advisor, they can subscribe to messages, right? Things like that. A very specific, very personalized journey for the caregiver. Sometimes there might be more than one caregiver, right? But depending on the need, brother and sister both taking care of their mother. So creating that caregiver ecosystem, multiple people taking care of the care recipient. It's all managed through Health Cloud. You see reference to all the vendor integrations. That's where Commerce Cloud comes to the picture, right? Like a vendor marketplace, so that caregiver is not having to go through multiple places to buy stuff that are relevant for him, right? Content being served up in the same platform, different product and services. So we have aggregated product and services from multiple vendors. So Commerce Cloud creates that seamless experience. And then on the right side, you would see a third-party digital payment platform, right? So that people can actually securely pay for the services they're buying through the platform itself. And then, key to this was also the integration layer, right? And that's where we'll see a lot of growth, as Chuck was saying. This will continue to grow. We'll continue to add more products and services around caregiving, everything around caregiving, and Sompo being able to aggregate all of that. That's where we see a lot of growth. And so we needed a platform that can securely integrate the core Salesforce with all these third-party vendors. That's where MuleSoft comes to the picture. And then you see on the right side, obviously, some of the office productivity suites, things like MS Teams integration to drive sessions between caregiver and care advisor and things like that. So it's a platform which we felt very confident we can stand up in the required amount of time. It's ready to go, as Tom and Chuck were saying. We're launching beta this month, and then ready for primetime launch end of this year or early January. Tom and Chuck, if there are any final comments that you want to make, otherwise we can open it up for questions.
I mean, obviously, we keep talking about ecosystem. I mean, maybe we should just, if it makes sense, talk a little bit more about what that really means. So, we realize that, eventually someone's going to be sitting on this platform, and they are today. We're actually going into beta, and they will need access to this ecosystem. So, what do we have in our ecosystem? Tom mentioned that we have coaching and care advisors. That's part of our own team, and we want to make sure that you get the right concierge level service, because at the end, we talked about time is a problem, stress is a problem. We do an assessment too to make sure that you're in a good headspace and you kind of know what you need to do and where you need to go. That's an important kind of upfront process that we go through before we actually have anyone use the platform. But more importantly is that we go through a vetting process to bring in certain vendors and other products and services. Like, for example, you need someone to come and prepare a meal or to transport somebody, or perhaps you need information on trust and will or other financial information, or your bills to be paid. I mean, those are just some examples of things that you would see in the ecosystem, and we're continuing to add to the ecosystem. Again, it's fragmented. You can go out there and Google search all you want. There's plenty of vendors out there that do these one-off services. But what we're trying to do is can we get it to the folks in one place at an affordable price point? Because at the end of the day, there's still a price when you buy items. You want to make sure you're getting the right product at the right price. The same way you would go to a Costco or you join an AARP or anything else. You want to make sure that it has a stamp of approval by Sompo. That we say this vendor is approved, this product is real, you could use it, and you're not going to get ripped off. That's the game plan. So I'll just pause there. I wanted to add that piece.
Tom, anything else you want to add? Key takeaway for the audience?
I think, a couple of things. Echo my earlier point. I mean, we think this is, a really exciting opportunity to address, a critical societal issue, and we're extremely excited to be a part of it. So this is not just a typical project for PwC. We have a long-term relationship that we've entered with Sompo to help ensure their success, because we think it's that important. And hopefully you do too. I mean, certainly if this is something you've experienced, you think it's something that might be valuable to your employer, let us know. If you work for a company that maybe can participate in some way, shape, or form in the ecosystem that we've been explaining up here, let us know. The concept is definitely an ecosystem. There's proprietary components that Sompo owns, but the idea is we grow and scale, those partnerships that Chuck was just describing are going to continue to increase. The feedback we got from employers, from benefit brokers was nobody's really solving as much as we're trying to. There's a lot of little kind of one-offs, but employers don't want to manage 30 different relationships to be able to address this challenge as robustly as Sompo is.
I just want to close with one more thing. Rushan, you started this by saying...
He always has to one-up.
I know, no, it's about him. I'm not trying to one-up you. No, this is about Rushan. He came here and says, we're transforming, we're doing something different outside. Remember, Sompo is a property and casualty business in Japan. Right. And let's fast forward what we ended this whole conversation. We're talking about a caregiver, digital platform here in the U.S. Completely different.
Totally different.
So,
yep, absolutely.